Hey everybody, how's it going? So I have a pretty typical morning routine, which is I will make my eggs, sit down at the table, and read my news. Typically I'll go to read some Bloomberg, read some New York Times. I will try to avoid rage reading the opinion section. The New York Times to me is kind of like a grocery store. Like you can go to the hard journalism section to kind of learn some hard reporting on the ground, learn something about the world, or I could rage read the opinion section, which I consider to be like going to the freezer and buying the ice cream. I try to avoid rage reading the opinion section, but I will read it and I will try to get an idea of what is going on in the world. And I just wanted to walk you through my experience doing that this morning. Again, I am not an expert. I'm not an epidemiologist. I am not an economist. I am not a PhD. I'm a dude that fixes MacBooks that just kind of wants to get an idea of what's going on in the world so he can plan his life. So I wanted to kind of walk you through what that experience is. So I was reading Bloomberg, and on the front page, I saw this. So I clicked, and it is about the new COVID Omicron variant. It says, Omicron could fuel surges with severe consequences, WHO says. Severe consequences. Ignore this over here. We'll go to this video that's linked shortly. It says the WHO is calling on member states to start testing widely for the new Omicron variant, saying its divergent design could fuel future surges of COVID-19 with severe consequences. The mutations may allow the variant to escape protection from vaccination or previous infection, and could give it a transmission advantage, the Global Health Organization said in a technical briefing document for its members. The likelihood of potential further spread of Omicron at the global level is high, the report said. Depending on these characteristics, there could be future surges of COVID-19, which could have, again, third time, severe consequences. The degree of damage depends on a number of factors, including where the surges occur, the WHO document said. The global risk related to the variant assessed is very high. No deaths have been linked to the Omicron through Sunday, according to the WHO. The WHO called on member states to take immediate action, including enhancing surveillance and sequencing efforts, widespread use of some PCR tests to detect the variant, again, seems normal. Accelerated vaccination coverage, especially in high-risk groups, that makes a lot of sense to me. Adjusting international travel measures in a timely manner, that's a topic for its own video. Using masks, physical distancing, and crowd avoidance to reduce transmission risk. I'm not really much of a crowd person anyway, and, again, this makes sense to me. Putting early warning systems in place to inform and adjust public health measures, that makes sense to me. And preparing to maintain essential health services in response to potential surges. Admittedly, I think this should be number one, but this most certainly makes sense to me. So the article goes over it, and it talks about severe consequences 3 times. Now, when you're loading this on mobile this morning, right next to this article, literally right next to it is something else. You read this, severe consequences, severe consequences, severe consequences. You're probably kind of on a high alert thing, like, oh my God, this is bad. And then right next to it, I get this. Doctor who saw Omicron early says symptoms different to Delta. People infected by Omicron in South Africa are showing very different symptoms to those suffering the Delta strain, said the doctor who alerted government scientists of the possibility of a new variant. Patients who contracted it complain of fatigue, head and body aches, occasional sore throat, and coughs, says Angelique Coates, I apologize if I mispronounce your name, who is also the chairwoman of the South African Medical Association. I'm going to keep repeating this. Not a doctor, not an epidemiologist, not an economist, not a PhD, not an expert. But fatigue, headache, sore throat, kind of sounds like a cold. Delta infections, by comparison, caused elevated pulse rates, low oxygen levels, and a loss of smell and taste. Again, not an expert, but elevated pulse rates and low oxygen, that's kind of scary. Headache and a sore throat, that kind of sounds like a cold. Or dare I say, that's not even the type of cold where I would skip some of my morning cardio routine. After weeks of almost no COVID patients at her practice in Pretoria, the capital and epicenter of South Africa's current surge, Coates said she suddenly started seeing patients complain of the symptoms on November 18th. She immediately informed the government's Ministerial Advisory Council on COVID-19, and laboratories the next week identified a new variant, she said. One of the interesting things here is they notified everybody. They immediately notified everybody, and their reward for that was travel restrictions that will wreak havoc on their economy, which I do wonder if other world leaders are watching that and then thinking to themselves, maybe it would be better for our economy if we take a little bit more of a Chinese approach to honesty in reporting, if you know what I'm saying. But that's a topic for its own video in and of itself. It says, I said these different symptoms can't be Delta. They are very similar to Beta, or it must be a new strain. I don't think it will blow over, but I think it will be a mild disease, hopefully. For now, we are confident we can handle it. The WHO is analyzing the new mutation. She said it's too early to say how transmissible and severe it is. And what's interesting is when you get to the end of it, scientists advising South Africa's government told media briefing on Monday that while Omicron appeared to be more transmissible, cases appeared to be very mild. Not mild, very mild. There have been a significantly large number of breakthroughs of people who are fully infected. Chairman of the government's COVID council said in an interview with Bloomberg, those so far have been mild. Coetzee's patients have been relatively young. A vaccinated 66-year-old patient did return a positive test on Monday, but was only mildly ill. Mildly ill, not in an 18-year-old swimmer, not in a 30-year-old soccer player, 66-year-old, which is typically not insulting 66-year-olds, no offense. It's just when I'm thinking of an immune system in its prime, I'm not thinking of somebody over the age of 60. And that was mildly ill. So the first article that I read says severe consequences 3 times. And then literally right next to it is, yeah, all the cases we've been reporting seem to be not mild, very mild. Oh, and a 66-year-old got it and they appear to be fine. And then obviously there's this one in the first article, this video that wasn't showing up when I read the news earlier, but is now, because often Bloomberg will have a video that's kind of related to an article show up in an article so that you kind of go down the rabbit hole of reading more news. And it says, and I quote, "Don't panic over Omicron variant," says epidemiologist, right under, "could fuel surges with severe consequences." I am a person, again, to get my idea on it, I'm a person who in the beginning of the pandemic had no problems wearing a mask, had a mask mandate in my store. I explained the case or my opinion on why I came to that decision here, along with a bunch of little documents on why it made sense for me in the beginning to have masks. I had a mask mandate in my store up until June of this year, and I also got myself a vaccine. Admittedly, I did not get the vaccine as early as I would have gotten it had I had some sort of evil COVID denier governor like Ron DeSantis. If I had a governor like him instead of a governor like Cuomo, I actually could have gotten a vaccine up to 45 days earlier. That's right. In New York, in order to get a vaccine, you had to check a bunch of particular boxes in order to get it. Whereas Florida had we're going to give it to the old people first. After that, first come, first serve. But again, that itself is a topic for a whole other video. I did all the things that I could early on, besides economically destroy myself, and I wore masks, and I got a vaccine. So I'm by no means what I imagine somebody would call a, quote, COVID denier. But I'm reading this and I'm at a point where I believe that I am less informed for the fact that I read the news this morning than if I didn't. Like, Erica is dealing with a personal family situation right now that she wanted to handle on her own, and she is not reading the news or keeping up with all this stuff as a result, and she's spending a lot of time with family. So she has had no time to read about any of this. And I have a feeling that in spite of the fact that she has not had time to read about any of this, that she is probably less ignorant on this variant than I am as a result of reading the news. Again, I read the front page on a reputable outlet, then I read what's right next to it, and then I see what's right next to it, and each one of them is a piece of information that negates what I just learned prior to it, to the point where I want to understand what's going on in the world. I want to be informed, which is why I read the news. I read it even if it depresses me. I read it even if it angers me. I read it to get an idea of what is going on in the world. But I am at a point right now, and I know this is going to aggravate people. Videos where I discuss these will typically get, 10 to 20 or 30% dislike rate from people screaming, You are not an epidemiologist. You are not an economist. You are not an expert. Go back to fixing MacBooks. This is not over until we say it's over. You do not get to go back to your life when you want. You go back when we tell you to. Yeah, again, it tends to get a lot of that as the top voted comments. But I'm honestly at the point where the way that I am looking at handling this going forward is just not reading it. And I say this because I recognize that if I'm at the point of thinking this, when I was following restrictions early on, I was rearranging my business early on, I was telling people early on that if they wish to stay home and collect a full paycheck because they are afraid of COVID, that they are more than welcome to do so, as someone who was willing to do all that early on. I read this, and I am literally at the point where I want to read the news. I want to understand what's going on in the world. I don't feel like I understand what's going on in the world anymore as a result of actually looking at the news. And I'm just at the point of just turning it off altogether. And I wonder how many other people, when they read this, when they go to their particular source of news and they see so much contradictory stuff, even in the same article, how many of them are literally just turning it off altogether and just saying, oh, well, I'm not saying this because I want people to turn off the news. I'm not saying this because I think it's better that people are uninformed. I'm doing this because I just kind of want to coax the individuals who curate these websites, because there are many websites very similar to Bloomberg like this, to understand what my reaction is, because perhaps many other people likely are having the same reaction, which is, okay, severe consequences. Oh shit, I should be afraid. And you scroll down 3 lines, don't panic over it, says epidemiologist, where they're like, huh? And they probably just hit X and go on with their day. I don't think it is a good thing if society en masse just unplugs themselves from sources of information. But I think a lot of people are going to read stuff like this and just go, boom, and be done. And then when something comes along that is actually serious, they'll be less involved and less plugged in to information that is relevant to them in their lives in society. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Again, do you read this stuff every day, or have you gotten to a point where you just hear something on the television, or you just see an article and you just scroll right past it because you're just fatigued and done with it? I'm very curious. That's it for today. I usually say, as always, I hope you learned something. I did not learn anything from reading this. I doubt many of you did either. I'll see you in the next video. Bye now.